We will now move our attention to the Muslim world, and we will begin by looking at the ancient Turks. Ancient Turkish society was different, and so they also had a contribution, obviously, towards education. So let's begin by looking at the ancient Turks. The Alp concept was widespread, and we will look at Alp in a minute. An Alp human being. An Alp is a kind of human being defined by the Turks. And they defined this human being as a warrior, fight wars, and win wars. Wise had to have wisdom, knowledge, content, intellect. Extroverted was interested in people other than himself, was not an introvert. He was extroverted, belonged to a society, wanted social realms and social normality in his or her life, was a nomad, moved from place to place in search of the good, whether it was for food, for farming, for growth, for development, whatever it was a nomad, gaining knowledge from ancestors and old wise people. Like we see, even in the previous pieces that we saw of societies, we saw that the old, the ancient people with the wisdom were supposedly the teachers. And so learning from them was seen as critical even under the ancient Turks. Dependency on the previous generation, if they are surviving, was important because there was good learning that could happen from that previous generation. Oldest Turkish written texts go back to a period before Islam. So Turkish literature existed even before Islam made its way into Turkey. And that literature was seen as important. The Turks liked their literature, wanted their literature to be transmitted to the next generations, but we will soon see a change in that trend. In ancient Turk, before Islam, there is no gender difference in educating youngsters. In other words, boys and girls both received an education in ancient Turkey before Islam made its way there. Boys and girls were both seen as important individuals to receive good quality education. When At that time, when Western education is being influenced by Christianity, Eastern education was being influenced by Islam. So we see the two running in parallel. Okay? Education in the East, under the ancient Turks, for example, was gaining the influence from Islam, while Western education in the West was gaining the influence from Christianity. And that is important, and to understand that the two religions were in their own ways having an influence on education in their respective parts of the world where they had the influence. The God for the ancient Turks and theology concepts encapsulated education, because Islam comes in now into Turkey, and the concept of God and Islamic values and Islamic teachings begin to take root in Turkish soil. And so Turkish education now begins to revolve around the Quran, the Hadith, and those kinds of religious books and teachings of Islamic philosophers. In this period, an absolute truth concept gained importance and was taught to people in a dogmatic way. And absolute truth is what? God. That's absolute truth. Nothing else can be absolute truth. And because of the Islamic influence, the absolute God idea took root, and that is what was being taught to all Turkish young people in a dogmatic way, and that is in a strong, forceful manner. You had to accept what the absolute truth was. In other words, you had to accept the oneness of God, the finality of the Prophet Muhammad, and the works of the Quran and the Hadith and what the Islamic philosophers were sharing and talking about, and Turkish literature, Turkish education, Turkish schooling takes a turn, hopefully for the better.